Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into one of the biggest questions in Christian theology. What must I do to be saved? We're going to use our sources to map out the different answers and, see how they all fit together. Okay, let's dive in. Our whole quest today is really framed by this ancient question from the Psalms. It gets right to the heart of it all. What does it really take to stand in God's presence? What's required to secure a place in the afterlife? The answer, as we're about to see, is somehow both simpler and way more complex than you might think.
So here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the absolute foundation. Then we'll explore what looks like a conflict between two different paths. And finally, we'll try to resolve all that tension with one of the most powerful stories ever told.
All right, so where does this whole journey to salvation even begin? Well, before we can even start talking about what a person has to do, our sources are crystal clear that we first have to get our heads around what has already been given. The sources define grace as the absolute starting point. Think of it like this. It's getting something amazing you totally don't deserve, or maybe dodging something awful that you probably do. It's presented as this foundational, unearned, unmerited gift. It's just there. And this idea of grace isn't just about what happens after you die. Our sources talk a lot about what they call common grace. This is the idea that God's favor is all around us in ways that benefit everyone, whether they're righteous or not. Think about it. A world created to support life in the first place, that right there is presented as an incredible act of grace. Okay, so this foundation of grace immediately brings up a huge question. If it's a gift, how does a person actually receive it? Well, the sources lay out two main paths, and we're going to start with the one that's all about faith. This verse from Ephesians, wow, it's a huge one for this side of the argument. It says flat out that salvation comes through faith. And our sources are careful to define faith not just as believing a fact, but as an active trust in God's promises. And notice how it explicitly separates this from human effort, so nobody can ever brag that they earned their own way in. But then, things get a little more complicated. The sources also highlight a really different emphasis, especially when you start looking at the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, what scholars call the Synoptic Gospels. Now this is where it gets really fascinating, right? This perspective argues that while nobody earns salvation, your actions, your active obedience, are consistently presented as the necessary response. It's the gateway, as the source puts it, to eternal life. So here it is, the big tension that has fueled centuries of debate. Is salvation about belief, or is it about behavior? Is it a gift you just passively receive through trust, or is it something you have to actively pursue through your actions? This isn't just some dusty academic question. This very debate was a key driver of the Protestant Reformation, and it still shapes different churches today.
But what if we're looking at this all wrong? Our sources suggest that maybe the conflict isn't what we think it is. The real opposite of grace isn't works. It's not about doing good things. The opposite of grace is merit, the idea that you can earn your way to heaven. And that reframes the whole thing. It means God can be the source of both saving faith and the obedience that follows, because neither one is about us earning our spot. And that brings us to this dramatic, real-world case study that just puts this whole debate to the ultimate test. It's the powerful, gut-wrenching story of the criminal on the cross, crucified right there next to Jesus. Now here's the detail that often gets missed. According to the Gospel of Matthew, at first, both criminals were mocking Jesus along with the crowd. But then, as they were all literally dying, something shifted in one of them. He had this profound transformation, defending Jesus and admitting his own guilt, saying, "Hey, we deserve this." And with his last few breaths hanging there, he makes this simple, desperate plea. It wasn't some long, complicated prayer. It was just this raw expression of faith, a belief that this man dying next to him was actually a king, with a kingdom that existed beyond death. And Jesus' response? Bam! Immediate, absolute. There was no waiting period, no checklist, no "let's see how you do," just a direct promise, right then and there, granting him salvation. And this just brilliantly illustrates the whole point. The source here drives it home with chilling clarity. This man was physically incapable of doing a single good thing. He couldn't get baptized, he couldn't pay back the people he stole from, he couldn't live a better life. He was dying. He was saved by his plea of faith and faith alone. So, case closed, right? It seems to settle the debate completely in favor of faith. It's the ultimate proof that salvation is a gift, not a wage you earn. But
our sources suggest it's not quite that simple. We still need to bring these two paths together.
So what about that whole path of obedience? Well, this verse from the book of James gives us the other side of the coin. The argument here isn't that your good works save you. No, the idea is that a genuine, living faith will inevitably produce good works. They're the evidence, the proof, they're like the breath in the body that shows the faith is actually alive.
So when you put it all together, the sources actually present a pretty logical flow that makes sense of everything. It's not a conflict, it's a sequence. It all starts with grace, the unearned offer from God. Faith is the hand that reaches out and accepts that gift. And works? Those are the fruit, the natural result, the demonstration that the gift has truly been received and is changing a life from the inside out.
And so, we end up right back where we started, with a question. The sources suggest that the answer to "what must I do to be saved" isn't a simple choice between believing or doing. Instead, it points to a kind of faith that's so real, so alive, that it can't help but express itself through action. It suggests that true belief isn't just a thought you have in your head, but a total transformation that completely reshapes your entire life.